Welcome to our backyard. This is the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We are two friends having a discussion after everyone else has passed out or gone to bed. Grab a drink and listen as we discuss everything from automation, space exploration, and why the meaning of life is 42. Adios, motherfuckers. This is Nick. This is probably my last episode for a while. I wanted to say we're going to go over all the things that we wanted to say, didn't say, why I'm leaving, how the podcast is going to continue in the future, because it definitely will. And I hope to be back from time to time, just because life's gotten busy. I don't know what my future in the podcast is going to be, but it's going to continue for sure. Mike, you're going to pick that up, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. The podcast is not dying. I am unfortunately too dedicated to winning.
So before we get too far into it, Mike, how are you doing? What are you drinking?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit sad, but well, just how we began, I guess, with you is how I end. I'm drinking some Buffalo Trace. Had to go to two different stores to find it, but it was fitting. What about you, Nick? How are you, and what are you drinking?
Again, I'm pretty sad. I'm drinking some Four Roses. I went to the liquor cabinet, tried to find the thing I started with this podcast with, and surprise, someone drank it all. So
I wonder who that could be.
Go to the backup. Yeah, police are working on it. We're not really certain what happened, but it's gone. So let's talk about the podcast, Mike. I want to talk about how we started this podcast. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were both drunk watching the snowfall and decided it'd be a good idea to start a podcast.
Just about. I remember fire was dying. We had a whisper because our buddies were asleep, and it's kind of an open sleeping range. And we were laughing, making dumb jokes, just talking shit. And I was saying the place we were at reminds me of like the old British hunting lodges and people talking, discussing ideas, and you saying how you love just sitting around the bonfire talking about, dumb shit with that, and it just blossomed from there.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the idea of backyard philosophy came from. It's because, Mike, we both went to college, but most of the intelligent conversations I've had didn't take place in a college campus, but took place around a bonfire. I don't want to say with like-minded people, but the people willing to have a conversation about what was actually going on, ins and outs, pros and cons, people who knew things. And I almost wanted to, correct me if I'm wrong, I wanted to create like a mix of philosophical debate with a little bit of, micro people on the ground kind of idea of this is what's we want to happen, this is what's happening on the ground, just kind of get an idea of the truth and kind of combine some science in the way that a lot of podcasts aren't. I mean, it's easy to pick up, any podcast and listen to them, but I feel like we did our best to read the scientific journals and then also if we knew someone, talk to people on the ground to try and get an idea of what was actually happening and what's different from academia, because if anything I know, it's that academia is vastly different from operational practices.
Couldn't agree more. I was also really proud that so many podcasts are very niche and they stay in one lane and they never diverse. But we've always indulged our scientific and curiosities. We've always found sources and made jokes. We like you said, Nick, talk around the bonfire, like talk how actual people talk.
Yeah, and I think that's my favorite part, Mike, is that we were willing to read the articles and get the data, but we were trying to present it in a way that people can understand, and we also wanted to make jokes that people would understand. Like, obviously, we probably dated ourselves just through this podcast, but we are Austin Powers Monty Python people. and that's kind of the comedy we wanted to bring to this. And so as serious as our conversations got, no one's going to listen to just, very few people are going to listen to just someone rattle off numbers and data. But I wanted to be able to learn and laugh at the same time.
Oh, how many times have we come across a paper and we read it and we just went like, well, this is stupid.
Oh, all the time. The one that comes to mind is my mini I did on deer crossings. That was like, I wish if we had like a full time and we were doing this together, we were working in an office, I could just turn to you and be like, "You see this shit? This is fucking stupid. These idiots."
I still remember the one you told me about hemp. How we're still using the paper written in 1917 for modern data about hemp growth. I'm like, is no one else seeing this?
Yeah, literally no one else is seeing that, and that's what we wanted to bring. Is like, look, we're all busy. How many of us have time to go sit and read scientific articles? Apparently not me. Bad example. But yeah, we're basing a lot of our data off of stuff over 100 years ago. I mean, that seems like we should, I don't know, update that.
I also, my favorite is reading the sample sizes in scientific articles. We surveyed 10 people. It's like we found that 97% of Americans have X, but we surveyed 10 people.
So the goal here is not to dissuade you from reading scientific articles, even though we had a whole episode about why that's bullshit.
But Nick, I have to say, I also loved how I haven't really seen this in any other podcast, but of how we tried to come up with solutions. Like, we gave it the good college effort of throwing out ideas, what would happen, X, Y, and Z, and just like, I don't know, we're doing space colonization on how we would do it, or de-extinction, or if we brought back humanoid creatures from de-extinction, would we eat them? Just those questions and solutions. It was just, I'll be honest, Nick, it was really fun to have someone listen to my crazy ideas and not just shun me away.
No, I enjoyed that too, because one of the things that's probably one of the things I think that separates us from other podcasts is that we didn't just list problems. I mean, probably the first half of the episode we listed problems, but we also tried to come up with solutions. And not that they were great solutions, but fuck, they were something.
Yeah, I would say that kind of sums it up pretty well. It's like, we might not be the best ones, but we're all we got. But I'll be honest, Nick, on just a personal level, I mean, you're one of my oldest friends, and obviously we all left our home state as soon as pretty much we could, and we all went very different directions. So I'm going to miss talking to you once a week, having some drinks, having some laughs, sharing dumb memes with each other, making jokes of how I can't speak and how you always talk about trees. I'm severely going to miss this.
I'm also very sad, and I'm second guessing my decisions, but it's been super fun. So I love talking to you and talking to everybody and just kind of seeing, where everyone stands. Because, like, especially, I mean, if you've listened to the podcast, I have a strong lean towards ecological episodes. And so it's really interesting to me, especially because you're not in that realm. So the questions you ask help me answer questions that probably normal people would have, but it's just like so far beyond the realm. And I think, and it's probably hopefully the same way for the science. Okay, not science. Like,
I'm thinking of time
science,
crystals right off the bat.
Yeah.
You made me step up my physics and analogy game so much.
Well, because I didn't understand it.
No, I think we were the perfect balance. Like a third overlap. Like, we both have same kind of morals, same kind of humor, but we both go different routes for our interests. Yeah,
we
overlap.
definitely diverged since we met each other. You went more into the material sciences, and I went more into the ecological sciences. And I don't think anything could show that more than just our episode list. You have it starting off invasive species versus space mining.
It's very stressful doing this podcast. I'm not gonna lie, but it's anything fruitful needs some stress, needs some hard work to do, and I Man, it's really sucking. It's kind of hitting me now that I'm most likely not going to be, I'm definitely not going to be able to talk to you every week. And most likely we will grow farther and farther apart because this was like our main communication way.
Well, Mike, I wanted to run down our list of episodes and just maybe say something about them or each of them and just kind of maybe something we didn't say. I if you have, I don't really have anything to say about invasive species, but I want to talk about space mining unless you had something on invasive species.
No, if anything, I would have to say invasive species is very similar to our most recent argument in Atlantic versus Pacific. If when it comes to certain creatures, you gotta prioritize. You can't win everything.
Say space mining is the episode where I really stepped out of my area of expertise. Probably one of the episodes where I stepped most out of my comfort zone, but learned. I'd say if I had to narrow down to one episode where I learned the most, it'd probably be space mining.
Interesting. I don't know which episode I probably learned the most from. I learned. I'll be honest, Nick. There's not one single episode where I didn't learn a lot, and it like every episode has changed my perspective solely and changing who I am. I just looking at the episode list, like talking about nuclear waste, I still think of that bacteria you told me about that can eat nuclear waste. Like that.
So I'm super glad you brought up nuclear waste, and this is where one of our episode number 6, one of my favorite episodes, because one of my buddies who works in nuclear waste disposal texted me and was like, "Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how it goes." And I feel like that's not something that the media gets right very often.
That's wow, that talk about a gold star. Like to have someone in that field say, "Yeah, no, that's about accurate." From two novices, I would say that's high praise.
Yeah, that was kind of like I was like, "All right, fucking game on. We know what we're doing." Let's talk about one of the episodes we had to re-record, the wildfire episode.
Oh God.
I got a little bit too drunk on the first take, and we started contemplating my own mortality. Don't recommend. So
I do. I will have to say before we continue up the episode list. I do pretty much most of the editing, and hearing Nick twice in that or 3 times it was a lot. It was a lot.
wildfire's dangerous, and I love it, but yeah, we're not. That's that.
Yeah, Coral Reefs was sad, but actually that one gave me a lot of hope because there's a lot of innovation going into it.
Yeah, coral reefs is pretty cool. The thing I took away from that episode was the black coral reefs that like no one's ever really done too much studies of. That was really cool. I had no idea we had all these dark coral reefs in the North Atlantic, Mike.
Free Will. That's the episode that probably fucked me up the most.
Well, because that fucking sucks.
That one, I have complicated. It keeps me up at night still. I try to think of loopholes of how to prove free will, and that one did emotional damage. That one really, yeah, that one sticks with me. That was like a nightmare realization episode.
So a lot like AI.
Yeah. Well, AI, luckily, that was my kind of field. And I kind of saw a lot of stuff that you may not have seen before, or at least on the cusp order. So that was a little bit more easier for me. I do have to say, I did love our birth order episode with each child birth. The younger the sibling, the more likely they are to be gay. I, for some reason, still remember that.
Mom's gonna have a daughter no matter what happens.
And I also love how every astronaut's either been a firstborn or an only child.
Don't argue with data, I guess. One of the, I don't know, this is one of our first minis, the election of 1800 is my mini. I really love that one just because everyone talks about how this is the most divided the country's ever been. Like, no, this election almost destroyed the country. Like, this is the most divided we've ever been. Like, this is it. And I think that look on historical, like what was going on and we talk about how divided we are. It's like, no, we're not. We're about to literally break apart a country divided. That's not. It's not the case. It's the most divided we've felt for sure, but the most divided the U.S. has been, never.
I will have to say, all the idea of mini episodes was your idea.
Was it?
I think so. I think as we were doing full, and you said, "Hey, why don't we do like a one-off episode of a short story or something like that?" Because our first two mini episodes were Halloween, so I think we wanted to do something Halloween based, but we didn't really know what to do for a full episode, so I think we did minis.
Huh, that reminds me of that meme I sent you. It was like, hold on, this whole operation is your idea.
Yeah, I think fulls was more my idea, but I think minis is 100%. I think you started it.
Yeah, well, okay, I did because I wanted to talk about the tragedy of the commons, but I didn't want to.
That
It's
might
not
have
a
been it.
full. Yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't a full episode. And I did like that one because it's a very important philosophical argument that's used in pretty much everything, but I didn't know a way to relate it to people in a way that would last an hour. So I think that's where we started. So maybe it was
Yeah, that's probably right. It's probably either that or the Roman politician
Quintus Cincinnatus.
Quintus Cincinnatus. That's probably like
Pour one out for the homies.
one of the greatest people to ever live. But just, I mean, I'm just looking at the list of how many times like we've laughed. The guard donkeys, meth trout, Jack Churchill, bouncing bombs off dams, the Spanish Inquisition. If humans had a rutting season, like
Oh, that was a good one.
we were never scared to go down anything. And I'll have to say, my only biggest regret is we didn't try to get more guests on. We only had a few guests. Who knows what happens?
Yeah, the
in the
problem is
future.
socialization. And we're not that good at that.
Yeah, very true. And I also don't think people realize how much has to go into each episode. Like Nick's not doing this because it's, only 3 hours
Yeah,
of his time.
let's talk about why we did this. And like we said, we discussed this, but I wanted to, me personally, I work in forestry, which is a very hot button issue, and I wanted to spread a little bit of my knowledge about forestry to the general population, as well as wanted to just learn things. But that's kind of why I wanted to do this. Mike, what made you want to record, research, and edit all these episodes?
There was a mistake taught to me when I was growing up. Most parents say to their kid, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. I misunderstood that as a child. I thought I could do everything when I grew up. So I became a jack of all trades instead of a master of one. And I just loved tons of interests. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to drive. It's hard to get deep in the weeds. And it's especially hard to do it when you're by yourself. But having someone with a different background and different ideas and discuss, and I mean, all knowledge is self-evident. Like, you all learn it, your knowledge, the true knowledge, yourself. And I'll be honest, this podcast has definitely taught me far more than public education system ever did.
Well, that's not it's not a high bar, but continue.
Yeah, it's
See episode whatever number of public education.
I've always been curious, and it's, for the most part, my curiosity has been a detriment to me. It's made me spread too thin, too many hots in the coals. But this podcast was kind of a funnel, a vice. It gave me the opportunity to explore all these different avenues, all these different ideas, but still have a structure. And that was extremely nice. To be able to explore without bounds, but still be grounded.
So, Mike, the next episode I want to bring up is probably my favorite episode of all time, Living on Mars. I loved that episode because it was, so my job in real life is I grow trees. I grow trees and I have to look at competing vegetation, soil, all this stuff. Living on Mars allowed me to do that in an environment that I've never done before and to dive so far deep into soil, Martian soil, sunlight, all that stuff. I learned a lot about growing trees, but I also learned a lot about Martian soil. If I had to say my favorite episode, it'd be Living on Mars.
That makes me very happy as a space person. Just off the top of my head, probably my favorite episode is an episode that you came up with on the whim that turned into a full,
Oh, fuck.
which was the art versus artist.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say China. No,
No,
I do
no.
love the art versus artist argument.
That was one
That
of
was
my
a good one.
favorite. That probably is my favorite because we were both just enough liquid courage in us to spew ideas, but it to me it honestly felt like we were in the time of Socrates and Plato and Timaeus and Critias of just discussing ideas of like what if and blah 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 blah. Like there was no wrong answers. They were just throw out and see what happens. And I mean, I personally learned a lot about myself of how I visualize the difference between art and artists. And that one was just no structure, no plan. It just happened, and that was that was one of my favorites.
I really enjoyed that one. That one, and that's where looking back now, maybe Backyard Philosophy wasn't the best name. That's what we were striving to at the start. So we had a few different names tossing about, and I thought Backyard Philosophy was fitting because I wanted to recreate that moment we had just talking ideas around the fire and that I've had with a bunch of other people staying up late, everyone else is passed out, just you and one or two other friends talking like really in depth about a subject. And that's kind of where Backyard Philosophy came from, is we wanted to bring that to everyone. And I'm glad I'm glad we brought that at least to you, Mike.
Oh, that one was probably my favorite episode. It was just so natural, and it really did just feel like sitting around a bonfire talking on it, and just someone happened to hit record. It was just it just seems like the stars aligned so well. But if I had to do with like a structure one, I would probably have to say probably might be reincarnation. I'll be honest, probably any pseudoscience one has kind of been always my favorite ones, where there's a touch of reality but a lot of unknown behind it. Those are always just so fun. Because I'll be honest, Nick, there's been a bunch that we've done that's kind of on the sadder side, but with the pseudoscience one, it's almost like things can be, but there's a slimmer of hope somewhere.
Speaking of things that could be, Mike, I want to bring up my favorite mini episode.
Oh boy.
And I am gracious that you indulged me on this one. What if humans had a mating season?
Oh, that was a good
I
one.
thought that was hilarious. That was probably one of the most outlandish ideas we've discussed, but what a wild what if. That was probably one of the most fun minis to record.
Yeah, that was definitely up there for one of the best ones. Not it might sound a bit egotistic, but I was really proud of the Tiger Hunter one in Siberia, and I was really proud of the British one making bouncing bombs to go off the water to blow up German dams.
And here's the thing that and this is okay, so I think our biggest weakness as a podcast is our social media presence, and that's on me.
And time that's on me.
Time too, but I think as a storyteller, I think you are definitely the storyteller and I am the listener. I try when I do stories, like for the eggnog riot, you had a fucking poem, you had names. You're definitely the storyteller, and I am more the fact teller. I feel like you have more of you can build suspense and create a story better than I can.
Well, I would say you're definitely better with your words, especially for the full episodes, because I stumble over myself because I try to get the ideas out as fast as I can before I lose them. But I'm thinking of like when the dogs were skinned when they're trying to make a clock going across the Atlantic Ocean. Like that, you telling that story, I remember crying, laughing so hard I had to mute myself. Or one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain, he said, I want you to imagine yourself a moron. Now I want you to imagine yourself. Oh my god,
Well,
I die.
that's just good research. That's all that is.
You have such a way to my funny bone, and it's it's so funny since we've. I mean, obviously we were good friends beforehand, but now that we were forced to talk, well, not forced to, but now that we interact for hours on hand, we just got to a little bit more of our idioms, a little bit more of our tells, and what would make the other person laugh a little bit more. And you hit some of them straight on the head, like you would tell me things I never knew about, like tree graphing, and that just blew my mind when I realized that was a real thing. Like that or how we talk about modern Luddites. It's it's just amazing. It's just
I'm
and
still upset there wasn't a Luddites page on Reddit. Like that was upsetting to me.
like I'm not gonna lie, you've opened my mind to so much different biology in trees. Like I would never have known there are different types of photosynthesis for different plants based on them. It's like there's like C type, C1, C2, and C3 type. I would have
Mm-hmm.
never known that stuff without you. I would have never known like your softwoods tend to be ones that are green all year round. Your hardwoods tend to be ones that lose leaves. I There's so much biological, ecological knowledge gained from you that is valuable and irreplaceable to me.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk about the episode that I was most proud of and the episode you were most proud of. But the episode I was most proud of is the early episode is a mini I did, Philosophy of the Forest, which documented the philosophy of forestry in the United States. And that was something that probably got 0 listens, but I was really proud of the work that I did to put into that to get those 0 listens. But what Mike episode do you think you put the most effort in? What episode do you think you saw the most reward? What episode were you most proud of?
Ooh, I would have to say the most I put worked into is explaining any of my physics ones. So either Hadron Collider, States of Matter, um, anything physics wise, uh, Maxwell's Demon, because I have to change the way I speak. I have to make, I have to explain it to a person who has no knowledge in it. And I grew up with the philosophy is if you're able to teach it, that's the only way you know you truly know it. And that was hard. It's like entropy. I remember for Maxwell's Demons, entropy gave me. I spent 3 days, and I called I think 5 of my college buddies to try to come up with an analogy for entropy, because entropy was just one of those things like yes, but no. It was just so hard to put into words and define for everyone to understand. That one I put so much work. Or States of Matter, that one that turned into a two-parter. That one that I easily put 40 hours into it. That's counting editing, uploading, making images and stuff like that, not just research. But Nick, I'll be honest. We put a lot of work into these things, and we never expected anyone to listen. And I was actually surprised that we actually got some people to listen to us.
Yeah, let's shout out
The Norwegians.
the Norwegians, our number one day one homies.
Yeah. Norwegians, since the very beginning, have been consistently listening to us once a week. It might not be the same people, but by golly, consistently.
And we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you Norwegians.
Well, I don't know. Was it
And
the same
we
weird?
want to say, fuck the English. I hope that appeals to you. Don't know.
I thought you were going to say the Dutch. I can stand with everything, but I don't know. It was weird to me, Nick, because I honestly thought we would get 4 listeners, like, and they would be people we know. I was never expecting to get a couple hundred listeners a month or occasionally 1,000 a month, and I was never expecting strangers to listen to us.
No, same thing. I was expecting my friends from college and maybe some random people, but that's about it.
It was it, it was so exciting to me when me and you would go back and forth just saying, "Hey, we got this country this week. Hey, we got this country this week." we've had listeners from all over the world. And that is mind-boggling to me. How two high school friends who grew up in basic suburbs, traveled different distances, one went south, one went west, still were able to connect with tons of people in the world. It's, by golly, Nick, I'm proud of what we did.
Speaking of proud with what we did, what episode do you think you laughed the most at? I'll
Ooh.
start you off. Mine would be the dumbest political quotes episode.
Oh, that was a big one. That one made me, that when both oh god, that was a big one. I'll be honest, there's a lot. I've There's not been one episode I haven't laughed except for maybe the
Trafficking.
trafficking episode. That one, you know what episode I might have laughed the most? It might have been either Out of the Dark Ages or The Rituals of Burying People, because we just kept making dark jokes, and those are
What about
straight up my alley.
the Spanish Inquisition?
I I actually was disappointed with that episode because we had a guest, and our guest was not prepared, and that's kind of on my end. So I was a little disappointed with that.
What do you think if we were to start a brand new podcast today? Do you think we'd continue doing what we were doing? Do you think we'd focus on history, focus on technology? What if we were to start brand new? What do you think our outlook would be towards?
Well, honestly, I think if we are going to start brand new, we would probably have multiple podcasts. I don't think we're a one beer kind of guy. I think we like the change once in a while, and I think we hit it perfectly because this was a project we had complete control over. We could do whatever we want, and we kind of did that. And I'm happy with it because we touched everything: history, modern problems, science, philosophy. We just what ifs. We talked about politics even. I never thought we would ever do a politics episode, but
Yeah, we started off not wanting to get into politics, and we didn't take any sides, but I mean, we took our own limited government side, but we didn't take right or left side.
yeah, I am proud of that. We always, no matter what episode, try to come very neutral and to see both sides. Don't get me wrong, we were definitely opinionated, but we were open to hear both sides.
Do you know what episode really surprised me?
What's that?
The Fez episode.
Oh, I love that episode.
I don't know how you talked for 40 minutes on the Fez. That was incredible.
I just didn't realize how much Fez had to deal with the history of the world. And it's I don't think it was 40 minutes. I think it was like 30 minutes, but
Well, it was 29-minute episode, but we definitely
oh yeah.
talked
And then
for
we
longer
cut
than
yeah,
that.
cut stuff. Yeah. It's just like again, that's why I was so appreciative of you to have on the podcast, because I find some of the dumbest things on earth super interesting. I remember talking about lava lamps and how they fix the internet. I'm like, he's gonna get bored of this, but you never did. You're like, what the fuck? And it
Well, that's pretty fucking weird, Mike. So
well, they're weird, but it's so like I remember doing the Honey War one, like the border, like the sheriff kept capturing the other sheriff, and then the bunch of the militia found a deer, shot a deer to hell, and then left. And you're like, that's the most Midwestern thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, yeah, like it's just you're always willing to hear the stories and indulge my interests, which is very uncommon. As in case you haven't realized, I'm a bit weird.
no, I've realized that. But I like to do. I mean, we both have similar backgrounds, but it was interesting to get your take. I mean, one of my favorite little minis was just the American gun laws minis, and we didn't really bring politics in it. We just talked about the history of it, and it was nice to literally just talk about historically, just look at historical anecdotes and see how we came from where we got to here, and not have to get too deep into the politics of it.
You know what episode I just got reminded of that's up there for one of my favorites? Your dueling
that?
episode.
Oh, that was fucking fun.
That was so much fun. That was so grand. I'll be honest. I think I think the Spanish Inquisition is the only episode I was kind of iffy on. I'm just very proud of all of our work.
I think we did our best to provide a
Entertaining, interesting podcast.
entertaining but also informative podcast.
Yeah. God, we got to bring back duels.
Yep.
But I'm gonna miss you, my friend.
Well, I hope to be back from time to time.
I hope so too. Hopefully, I'll get super rich and I can just convince and pay you to come back.
Well, that's the dream.
That is the dream. You know what's the weird part? We've been doing this for nearly 3 years together, me and you, and we have not been paid once.
Yep.
And I mean, we've bought microphones, an RSS feed. We've it's our hobby has been a really interesting one. I do have a question for you before I tell the future of the podcast. What's been the biggest thing you've learned doing this podcast? And I don't mean fact, I just mean in general. I think for me, to give you some time, was how much was always hidden behind the curtains and people just never looked. Like recycling was a big one for me, of how much the world doesn't actually recycle. And it's all public knowledge, all right there. Just no one cared to read the literature. No one cared to actually know. And that was eye-opening to me. It also taught me a lot how to research, because obviously I liked storytelling. I liked to do research. I did good in school. But this was kind of different. This was to dig and do the truth, almost like a bit of journalism. So that was probably my biggest, was to dig a little deeper and find the truth and how things are not always as they seem.
I think the biggest thing I found out is, and not that I didn't know this going in, but it just kind of reinforced it, is every argument is good from what side you're coming from. Like, I look at like dams and hemps, and it's like all these episodes we did, there's a lot of reasons to do a certain thing depending on where you're coming from. So it's not like we're all arguing against a good or bad idea. It's just it's a good or bad idea depending on what side of the argument you're on, and it can benefit or be detrimental, whatever side. And I guess that just kind of reinforced it, of more of that, and also, I mean, simultaneously how important, but also how not important scientific papers are.
Yeah. Just want to get your opinion before you disappear forever. You know what also I found doing this podcast? Of how much the news cycle is late on something, or how new a technology is, but actually how old it is. Like, where should we have cities? Egypt is moving its capital city to a new city, and that's now just making the headlines. And we did that 2 years ago. It's also amazing how, I don't know if this is a conspiracy or me just going crazy, how I feel once we release an episode, 2 weeks later, someone else releases an episode mimicking exactly what we just did.
Yeah, that's always a little disappointing.
That one hurts a lot, because that's a lot of time we spent, and someone steals a bit of our thunder. But yeah. But for the future of this podcast, it's not going anywhere away. It is going to change a little bit, though. No longer will you have the back and forth of Nick and yours truly, but it's going to change a little bit to more of the minis type with storytelling. Telling of how things work, a specific item, specific theory, or history and science of, hey, this is what's happening, this is what did happen. This is an adventure, a treasure lost, a king, a warrior, a weird animal, a weird race. It's going to be a little bit more of the storytelling type. And hopefully, it'll be trying some new things, of trying to get guests on to get other opinions and stuff like that. And hopefully, if we get very lucky, Nick will come back for an episode or two. But I want to get it past the 3-year mark at least, and go from there and see if people keep listening. I enjoy this podcast.
Well, I'm sure everyone's not listening just for me, so I don't have any doubt of that.
I imagine, if we never taken a poll, if I had to make an educated guess of the fans is the wrong word, of the people's listening's favorite, I would say you're probably the favorite in the polls, followed by me.
I'd agree to disagree on that one. After doing a bunch of interviews for hiring people. I feel like, 50-50.
Little column A, little column B. Yeah. I will have to say, this has also made me much more comfortable to my voice. Because I think it's just common for everyone to kind of hate the sound of their own voice. But after God knows how many hours of hearing both me and Nick talk, and me and Nick talk about the same conversation we were already in, it's got me quite comfortable hearing my own voice. I assume it's probably the same for you, Nick.
Yeah, still not a huge fan of my voice, but what are you going to do?
But before you give your final words, I do want to say, you're one of my best friends. I can't imagine, I still don't believe that you actually did this with me. I really thought you were going to say I was crazy and go away after a couple episodes. I did not, in 10,000 years, would never bet that you've ride along with me this far. And this was just an absolute blast, and you will be dearly missed.
Well, as you like to say, Mike, in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm very sad to leave. I hope to fill this time with more learning, just a little bit of a different type. I'm extremely grateful for anyone who did listen to this podcast. Once again, shout out to the Norwegians. It's not easy to walk away from this, and I hope I'm not walking away. I hope I'm just pushing everything off onto Mike for a while, and then come back every now and then, do all the fun stuff. But that's kind of the plan. And I had a great time. I learned a ton. I don't regret doing this. It was super fun. I encourage anyone who thinks this is something they want to do to don't quit your day job, but start doing this and talk to Mike. Sounds like he needs a co-host.
Nah,
but
no one can replace
once
you.
again, thank you guys for listening. And before we get out of here, Mike, what are you reading?
Damn, hitting me with the nostalgia. Well, I'm reading Dante's Divine Comedy, and slowly we descend into hell. Alone in the dark, I shall walk through the valley of darkness. What about you, Nick? What are you reading?
Physiological responses in conifers, so same thing.
I will have to say, this new direction the podcast is taking for a while, we'll have probably a lot less trees without you.
I imagine so.
And Nick, you know I'm a bit of a sentimental guy, a bit nostalgic. So I found a poem for you that I thought, captures us pretty well. It is Dear Friend by Grinnell Willis. Dear friend, 'tis hard to say farewell, and harder yet it is to tell, in parting words, how strong the tie we sever now in this goodbye. We all shall miss thy gentle grace, thy willing hand and cheerful face. No other friend thy place can fill, through absent we shall claim thee still. God bless the work thou hast begun, and guard thee in the years to come. And when thy heart is weary or alone, come back and rest in thy home.
Mike was using a poem with God in it. What the fuck?
Gotta protect. I mean, I'm reading Dante's Divine Comedy. I gotta cross all my T's and dot all my
Fair
I's.
enough.
I don't want to say goodbye.
It's not goodbye. It's temporary leave. I'll be back from time to time. Anytime the government passes a ridiculous bill, I'll come back. Something to research. We'll be there.
All right, I'll hold you to it.
You'll hold the government to it, so I'll be back.
Goodbye, my dear friend.
Adios. Thanks for listening to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We rarely finish a podcast without missing a point we wanted to bring up, so let us know what we forgot. And if you have a topic you want us to talk about, let us know at Backyard Philosophy on Instagram and Backyard Philosophy Podcast on